Hello, and welcome to episode number 258 of the LSR podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all of the gaming industry. With me, I got Pat Evans. Hey, listen, we don't always got to have a big old party around here. It's just me and Pat here on a Friday afternoon talking some gaming news, which, listen, here's the deal. We're going to take you home. You're on your commute home on a Friday. You're going to get this in your ear holes. You're going to love it. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. And again, everything we do absolutely free. So please go in, subscribe, rate, review, all the cool stuff that you do to help us grow this here podcast. We'll talk about what's going on in Indiana. We'll talk about some, sports betting attempts in some of the unregulated states out there. And Pat's going to give you a teaser about something that's happening over on the site. But let's kick things off in Maryland.
Yeah, so, the last 2 years we've seen governors propose hiking tax rates for sports betting in their budgets, and they both passed. One in Ohio, just a few months after it launched, went from 10% to 20%. And then last year in Illinois, Governor Pritzker said, you know what, we're making a lot of money through this, but the sports betting companies are making a lot more. Let's do a tiered system where the more money they make, the more money they pay. It's, I think, 20% to 40% up from their base rate of 15% when they passed it. So that's happened twice now, and Maryland is now trying to do the same thing. Governor Wes Moore came out and said, all right, with his proposed budget, we're going to double the tax rate. I think it was 15 to 30%. And there it is. Maryland has a $3 billion deficit that they need to make up money. So that's a big chunk. I think I read somewhere from an analyst that that would probably boost it by another $92 million for the sports betting tax haul. So not really a big dent in that $3 billion deficit.
It's like, it's just something they can at least add on the deal, but it's not really doing it.
But, it's a little something anyway. I guess it'll be dependent on how the legislator feels about that. Again, it's a governor's budget, so you have to imagine it comes with a little bit more weight than just a normal bill being introduced. So we'll see what happens there. Of note, there's also 2 new bills filed from familiar names for online casino in Maryland, which might be a little bit more tax money than sports betting to help that deficit. Last year, Delegate Vanessa Atterbury guided an online casino bill through the House, and it fell on deaf ears in the Senate just because of a lot of cannibalization fears from the brick and mortar casino industry, or at least a few of the casinos in Maryland. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the Senate side this year. I would imagine it'll probably get through the House again if Delegate Atterbury does her same thing she did last year, as I think she will. Ron Watson talked at Nickel G's, the National Council of Legislators from Gaming States conference last year, about lessons learned from his effort, and he submitted a bill this year again. We'll see if he learned his lessons that he spouted last year.
Right.
But again, online casino might, just this signifier of the $3 billion deficit. That's when you're going to see, I think, these online casino bills get more movement as we're seeing these state deficits grow more significant.
So, Pat, these operators, I can only imagine, have to be getting a little bit nervous with this, right? Because all these states pass these things. They go in, they're doing all of their books. They're okay. We're paying this here. We're paying this here. This is what we're estimating for whatever. And the fact that they can just kind of go back in and say, all right, that's cool and all, but we're going to need some more money from you. And the thing is, they're kind of just prisoners to this, right? There's nothing you can do if you decide to pull out. One of your competitors is not going to pull out. So basically you're just leaving more business for them within the state. And so I imagine you're sitting there in these boardrooms going, oh man, this is probably going to be a theme across all of these states that we're in.
Yeah, we've seen other proposals from legislators across the country, Michigan, Louisiana, for starters this session. Yeah, ideally, I think for operators, they want it under 20%, and that's understandable. And I think when a lot of these states were, legalizing, they said, that's a good number. Let's go 15% or 20%. And then they see New York come out and do their 51%. And they're like, wait a second. But all these states aren't New York. Mm-hmm. So I think, yes, a doubling of a tax rate in a state like Maryland is significant. At least it's not up to 50%.
Yeah.
And of note, in Maryland, they're also raising table game stakes or taxes in this proposed budget. So I think the companies are going to be more concerned about that potentially than the online sports betting tax. So maybe they'll say, okay, you can have that, but let's keep the table tax the same. We'll see. But yeah, to your point, yeah, you can't pull out. You're then you just leave the rest of the money that you're not paying this taxes on the table for another company to scoop up. So it's not ideal for these companies, but as long as it doesn't reach that 51%, 40% or above, I guess they'll probably be like, okay, I guess I'll be okay with this.
From Maryland, let's head over to Indiana. What's going on over there with online casino?
Yeah, Indiana is one of those states that prior to this, heading into 2024, a lot of the industry was excited and bullish on their chances to legalize online casino. Then there was a case where Representative Sean Eberhart he pled guilty in 2023 to a conspiracy, basically saying he'll give some benefits to a casino company in exchange for a future job. Well, he got caught. He's spending a year and a day in federal prison. And when he pled guilty, legislative leadership in Indiana said, whoa, we're not going to talk about gambling issues for a little bit because, the public trust in our establishment's probably a little low because of this whole conspiracy case. Well, now this year we've got Representative Ethan Manning introducing an online casino bill. Seems like it's back on the table, which, that's good for Indiana. We'll see if it does have any sort of legs or if there's still kind of a hangover from this case. Again, it's a big gaming state, lots of casinos, one of the earliest online sports betting markets. It's been pretty ripe. I wouldn't be super surprised to see some movement, maybe not full passage, but at least get through a couple committees, maybe even the House, and see where it goes from there. But yeah, it was an interesting kind of state to watch last year after that whole conspiracy case came about, and yeah, the way the legislator just said, well, we're not going to touch gaming for a little bit just because this is kind of dirty.
So an interesting article that you have up over at Legal Sports Report, which, by the way, guys, all of the stuff you can go find more in depth than we're talking about here over on the site. But Pat, I really enjoyed this article because it's something that if you're in the bubble, right, you're kind of like, well, obviously, of course, right. But it's something I think that, it's worth kind of beating the drum for over and over and over and over again, which is the states that refuse to get something done. You see the citizens within there. One of the things we get search results. So we get all the different things like that. We get what are people searching for in their app stores? What are people looking for with all of that? We get all of that information now in this technology rich era that we live in. And we see, as we would expect, but maybe not some of these other people, that these states that don't have a legal option, they're still trying to find something.
Yeah, I mean, GeoComply often does this. They'll release little state-by-state reports of, what something did the opening weekend of the NFL season or whatever. And they always include fun tidbits, and there is one I'll get to in a second that's kind of goofy about Nebraska. But yeah, they did 7 states that are unregulated, and they track geolocation pins of users' accounts that they, total up, trying to attempt legal sports books in generally neighboring states. And, GeoComply blocks it, but then they take note of it and share this interesting information. And, I think the most interesting one, because to your point, all these states are going to have residents trying to do this, especially a state like Texas, all this chatter of legalization's coming about. Why not try to log on to a legal sports book? South Carolina, which hasn't even come close to legalizing. Right. There is a bill again this year to try to do so, but it is just next to North Carolina, which went legal last year and launched. And they saw an increase of 436.6% of accounts trying to attempt to log on to legal sports books. And I think that's just a signifier to your point of, wait, our neighboring state's legal, why aren't we? Let's try to get on there. And so that was nuts. Alabama and Georgia all saw above 100%, kind of, I think, similar talk of these states saying, well, the legislators are talking about legalizing it. Can we try? We'll see. Texas, of course, had a pretty strong growth. I think it was 57%, but they've had strong growth over the last couple of years just because of probably that House bill that passed in 2023. That note that I was talking about, I think this is what makes these report's really fun is they always find like a big section of where people are going. And they found this little farm in Iowa that they called the busiest field in Iowa. And it's just across from Omaha, Nebraska, where you can't bet legally. And people will go over to this little tiny field, and there were 326,000 pings from this field. I don't think there's that many people just hanging out in this field just because.
Right.
I think that's, signifying that there are people in Nebraska where in-person sports betting is legal. But that's a signal that people in Nebraska are saying, wait a second, I want to be able to bet mobily, even if I have to go to a cornfield over in Iowa.
And the thing about South Carolina, too, like you mentioned, their neighboring state in North Carolina legalizes, but you look at where Charleston's located, you look at where Columbia is located, they're far closer to Georgia, where it's also not legal, right? And so it's not like some of these states in the past where they did have you just got to cross the bridge. And yeah, it's a pain in the ass, but it's whatever. You cross the bridge and you can go and you can go bet. This is a hike to get to the border from Columbia or from Charleston or from whatever to get to a legal state. So yeah, they're just trying to be like, well, let's just see what happens.
Exactly.
Let's give it a whirl and see what happens, and it's just showing you these people, they want to do it. They can't go do it legally. And so they're just trying to log on anyway.
Yeah, you got to give them some credit, too. At least they're not going to offshore sports books. I mean, maybe they are after they find out that it doesn't work. But, at least they're trying to be legal and regulated the first time. And, yeah, to your point, a lot of the big cities in South Carolina are closer to Georgia. And that's, I think, last year when I was reporting on South Carolina, and I think it probably still stands, I haven't checked in with my sources, is, it's not likely to legalize in South Carolina until Georgia does. And probably to that point. A lot of it is also is Governor Henry McMaster has come out against gambling, so I think that has a lot of sway. I've heard Lindsey Graham, the big power player in the Senate from the U.S. Senate from South Carolina, is also kind of anti-gambling. So, there's some forces at work against South Carolina, but yeah, Georgia, I think, could help sway them in the long run. But again, at least these users are trying to be responsible and legal. I think that's a good thing to note from these GeoComply reports.
And if you are listening to this and you are from one of those states and you have a voice, just know that whenever they go and they try to log on to one of these legal books and then they get shut down, yeah, they probably are going to one of the offshore. I mean, these are people who want to make some sort of bet. So they're probably, Pat, the thing is their next action is probably just to Google, where can I bet sport? Where can I bet sports? And then you get one of these offshores where they're like, oh yeah, we'll take your action.
Honestly, true. And I think, one, that's the major reason why I think, the regulation and this whole movement to legalize sports betting is important, is to make sure, consumer protections. But yeah, I think also I've noticed all these states that are sending cease and desist to Bovada, I think it's above 24 states, I think, at this point. That's just one of these offshore sports books, and there's many more. So
I kind of roll my eyes every time I see these. It's like, okay, it's like, I get it. It's, it's the one that everybody kind of knows, but it's like, it's one of a dozen.
It's a drop in the bucket for that actual legal offshore handle. So I think, there definitely needs to be more public awareness of what it means to bet offshore and why it's bad and why there needs to be legal options. And again, credit to these people who are trying to to legally bet in states that aren't legal.
That's all they can do. And like we said, we're going to leave you guys today with a little bit of a tease. We have an interesting story heading up over at LegalSportsReport.com. So I'm going to let Pat give you as much or as little of a tease as he wants to give you.
Yeah, I think everybody knows at this point, all the industry eyes are on Texas and the hope to legalize Texas sports betting. If you've been following it at all, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick decides what the Senate can vote on. He's anti-gambling and says, as long as there's more Democratic support for an issue, he's not taking it up. Well, there was a huge vote to choose the new Speaker of the House, and the winner is somebody who in the last session, 2023, voted in favor of sports betting. Sports betting did pass the House. Didn't get a vote because of Patrick in the Senate. He voted for resort styling casino bill, which did not pass. So it's friendly now. The interesting thing is more Democrats, he's a Republican, more Democrats voted for him to be Speaker of the House than Republicans because there was another Republican vying for this House. So it's a very interesting bipartisanship issue there. see if that translates to the Senate, where maybe some more mainstream establishment Republicans kind of branch off against the GOP platform and say, hey, I want to support gambling because the platform's anti-gambling. Then maybe you see some more momentum. But for now, Patrick is not budging and is anti-sports betting. We'll see where it goes. Check out that story on the website soon.
Yeah, we're going to be monitoring the money flow there in Texas as well. Like we said, some very influential power players that are known to throw around their weight when need be, and that wasn't there 2 years ago, Pat. So we'll see if maybe that's influence has something to do with any of these things.
Yeah, Miriam Adelson, of course, bought a share of the Dallas Mavericks, and now she's throwing millions of dollars into politics. You can probably guess it's not just for the Mavericks.
Yes.
And because of her connections to a casino. Yeah, she's definitely trying to make her voice heard, and she's definitely not alone in terms of big spenders down there. Mark Cuban, Jerry Jones, Tillman Fertitta. I mean, yeah, they want something done. They're going to spend to try to get something done. We'll see if something gets done.
Yeah, it's if you're not familiar, you probably remember Sheldon Adelson. If you're not familiar with Miriam Adelson, who now is the sole owner of all of that wealth, we're not talking rich, guys. We're talking wealthy. We are talking like $30 billion type of stuff, So like that's the wealth we're talking about here with this. Like, so that money certainly can make things happen if things want to get to happen. So follow that story over at LegalSportsReport.com. As we said, everything we do absolutely free over there. Pat and company putting out awesome stuff to keep you guys informed of what's going on in the industry. They listen, they read, they summarize, they talk to the people, so you don't have to. Remember that. So go over there, LegalSportsReport.com, and everything here on this podcast free as well. So we do appreciate a subscribe, a rate, a review. All of that stuff is great as well. For Pat, I am Matt. Talk to you guys next week.